It's the year 2019. The graphic novel Watchmen, written by Alan Moore and drawn by Dave Gibbons, is 32 years old. It's the year 2009. The long-awaited big-screen adaptation is finally being released, after having spent the last 20 years in constant development, a victim of turnaround and creative differences. It's the year 2000. Terry Gilliam fails to raise the necessary budget his version of the film requires, and he abandons it, declaring Watchmen unfilmable. 3 more directors will cycle through the project before it will land at the feet of Zack Snyder. It's the year 2019. Snyder's Watchmen is now 10 years old. This is how the world has changed in those 10 years.
The Superman exists, and he is American.
Yes! What do we have here? I don't feel so good. Save Martha!
Upon its release, Snyder's Watchmen effectively flopped at the box office, outperformed 2 months later by the only other comic book film of 2009, which grossed more than twice what the former did. But more importantly, the overall response to the film was as split and fragmented as one could imagine.
Please, there's no need for violence.
In fact, it'd be an easy argument to make that Watchmen became and has remained the most divisive comic book film of the millennium. Much of the conversation surrounding it has revolved around how faithful it is to the graphic novel, a sentiment that's simultaneously been used to sing its praises and to rip it a new one. For myself, I think the film's most interesting and perhaps most successful components are where it in fact deviates from the graphic novel. Snyder's exchanging of Alan Moore's intertextual references to past comic books with intertextual references to past films, i.e. the Dr. Strangelove lifted war room sequences featuring an elderly Richard Nixon.
What about the rest of the Warsaw Pact countries?
Czechoslovakia, Poland, and East Germany have mobilized their forces.
And the rubber nipple muscle suits lifted from the Joel Schumacher Batman films are both, in my opinion, pretty inspired choices, moments where Snyder really transforms the material into something of his own. And the very best of these moments undoubtedly is the film's opening credits sequence, which may sound like such a slight thing to praise, but to be honest, I've never not felt a sense of awe whenever watching it. The kaleidoscopic, histrionic mishmash of pop culture iconography smacked together and populated with Moore and Gibbons' vibrant imagination is, I think, among the best sequences, or perhaps just the best sequence Snyder has ever put to film. It's sequences like this, or Dr. Manhattan's origin sequence, that I think really play to Snyder's strengths. Even his greatest detractors over the years freely admit that he has a unique talent for setting up striking shots. His is essentially an advertisement-like approach, creating the largest maximum impact possible within each moment regardless of whatever's occurring on screen. Almost always achieved by his now infamous use of slow motion, which is just about applicable anywhere but proves particularly effective when mixed with something elemental on screen, like fire, rain, lightning, smoke, or some combination of all of them. Add that together with a smattering of extreme close-ups and a heavy dose of echo and reverb in the sound mix to really tie everything together, and you got the makings of a moment that's almost instantly arresting. This approach of Snyder's is one of the reasons why his films make for such great trailers, or even video essays. They're basically the best kind of fodder for extended montage sequences. Individual moments by themselves are undeniably enticing, but as a whole, even the best of his work isn't left without a feeling that something is missing. More than a few moments in Watchmen simply come across clumsy and disjointed, including, in my opinion, as heretical as it may sound, much of Rorschach's extended monologues.
Good joke. Everybody laugh. Roll on snare drum. Curtains.
And to be honest, I think it's because, for as much of the flamboyant visual stylist that Snyder is, he's never been a particularly gifted storyteller. partly made evident by the fact that he doesn't really differentiate what to give and what not to give that heavy maximum impact spin. Nothing's ever light, but instead almost everything in Watchmen is given that kind of moody, self-serious, lofty weight.
You're drifting out of touch, Doc. God help us all.
Characters tend to speak in maxims, treating everything like some kind of speech rather than just a conversation.
Things are tough all over, Cupcake. It rains on the just and the unjust alike. The comedian has a little bit of both. And he always thought he'd get the last laugh.
Snyder's Watchmen is a film that frequently struts around screaming about how important it is, but I think the attempts at depth often just end up coming across hammy and pompous.
Will you smile if I admit I was wrong?
About what?
Miracles.
In fact, it's almost as though Snyder is more interested in the idea of Watchmen, rather than any of the ideas Watchmen talks about. So many of his shots, particularly those not directly inspired by panels from the original comic book, focus often directly upon Watchmen's iconography. I mean, within the first 10 minutes alone, there are 4 separate extended shots that all center around that yellow smiley face button for no real reason other than, hey, look, it's the smiley face button from Watchmen. Again, I think if there's an argument to be made against the film, it's that so much of it, if not all, is surface level, all flash with little depth. Whereas the comic book has within it this subtextual idea about how ridiculous it is to parade around fighting crime in a colorful costume, Snyder's film seems to be about how badass it is. But despite all of that, or actually because of it, I actually think Snyder's Watchmen and all of its hefty pompousness is actually kind of charming.
Oh God. John?
For as much as you could dog it for how grandiose and self-important it is, there's also, I think, a sense of fun in just how overdone it all is.
What happened to the American dream? What happened to the American dream? It came true. You're looking at it.
At the least, Watchmen is much closer in tone with Tim Burton's Batman films, or even Thor Ragnarok, than with the films Christopher Nolan or the Russo brothers have made. But all of its reveling in excessive grandiosity actually puts it, I think you could argue, in a place where it borders on campiness. This is probably a topic for another time, but retrospectively, I think Watchmen has this weird place as the middle chapter of a trilogy of Snyder's films that are about as campy as you're gonna get with big-budget mainstream fare. I mean, compare them with the Adam West Batman show. Exchange the pows and zocks with ridiculously overblown gore. All of those Dutch angles and the silly 90-degree climbing sequences with slow motion. Keep all the hammy line deliveries.
Remember, motor is safety.
Gosh, Batman, when you put it that way...
Take us to DEFCON 2. Begin fueling the bombers. Dr. Manhattan has 2 days. After that, humanity is in the hands of a higher authority than mine.
And borrow the low-key homoeroticism from the Joel Schumacher films.
You just couldn't stand it she was gonna kiss me and not you. Couldn't stand it something was gonna be mine and not yours, could you?
And there you go. And I mean, if none of that was enough, Matthew Good is basically channeling Vincent Price with all of those hammy villainous tones.
And for this, I am ashamed. Ashamed that you must now share such inadequate a reward.
And I say all of that in a positive light. Watchmen is a fairly messy movie, but it's often kind of gloriously hammy. It's weird, it's a movie I'm kind of almost proud of for just simply existing. I've often thought that it was a movie that was released at the wrong time. Although to be fair, I'm not really sure when the right time for it would have been. In the 10 years since its release, it's gathered to itself something of a cult following, drawing comparisons to Ridley Scott's Blade Runner, or perhaps even David Lynch's Dune. But the important distinction is that unlike those two particular films, Watchmen is, by all accounts, the exact film Zack Snyder wanted to make. And the fact that Warner Brothers bankrolled such a bizarre, hard R feature with no A-list stars and pretty much let Snyder run with it in a genre of film where the story is all too frequently the opposite is kind of admirable. Thank you guys so much for watching. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and cutting-edge analytics, Squarespace is the best all-in-one platform out there that can help you create a unique online presence to truly stand out. That's true for all types of businesses, but even more so if you're someone like me, a freelancer working in the creative arts. If you're a filmmaker or an animator or a musician or an illustrator or anything else, there's simply no better platform out there for you to showcase your work. There's nothing to install or patch or upgrade, and best of all, it's incredibly easy to use. Right now you can go to squarespace.com/royaloceanfilm to save 10% off your first purchase.